Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. I was looking at the news, just trying to see what I was going to talk about, because I had a couple different things I was going to talk about. One was thinking about, carrying, concealed carry. I've talked about this a lot, and what I'm about to talk about kind of speaks to the heart of the concealed carry debate. Australia has been a country that has had leftist gun policies for 20 years, if not more. Basically, civilian gun ownership there is a non-thing. Okay, same thing in New Zealand, definitely in China. But with the way the world's going, and you're seeing what happened in Israel October 7th, when Hamas came in and attacked an unarmed populace. What happens? This weekend a mass stabbing happened in Australia. And it turns out this guy was kind of an incel guy who was suffering from schizophrenia. And he went loose and he stabbed some people. And it's tragic to think that, this type of behavior just happens. There's nothing anybody can do about it. There's no amount of law that is going to stop a crazy person from doing something crazy, whether it's with a knife, a gun, a car. A terrorist is a terrorist. And when you have society who's separated themselves off enough, the individuals haven't separated themselves off from society enough, where they don't have that attachment to people. They start seeing people as targets or objects. It's the mentality of the video game. And I'm not blaming video games. I'm blaming the mentality of the people that get sucked into things and they lose their humanity enough to where they start viewing people as objects. And I think that objectification of people is the problem that we're seeing throughout the world and throughout the United States with violence in general. There was a point in time in the United States where we tried to know our neighbor. Live and let live was the motto. And there's a lot of people that still try to do that. What happens when bad things come knocking, though? Time and time again, we see these idiots who have been on the radar, who are mentally unstable. And I'm not saying if you've taken some sort of antidepressant, or hell, I don't even care if you're doing weed, to be honest, or smoking weed or whatever. I don't think that's really an indicator that you have issues. It means that you're trying to manage them and deal with them. And I think time and time again, we're seeing people that are being boxed into little compartments of their own making. I can speak to this because I've done it myself in the past. Not done anything violent, but compartmentalized myself into a place where help doesn't seem like it's a thing. And with that, there's some depression that comes in, because what are you going to do? How are you going to get out of it? A lot of us in the 2A community, a lot of us males specifically, we've been taught by society not to ask for help. Because if help's ever given, it's usually because there's some string attached to it. And I think that leads down the path that we're seeing in society, where the mental breakdown of people, soft people, is causing violence on a scale we haven't seen. Think about what happened there in Australia. He didn't have access to a gun, so he used the next best thing he could have access to that was a cheap alternative, which is a knife. And a knife in a very crowded place is just as deadly as a gun. If you've taken any shooting classes or any self-defense classes, you're taught to take down a man or a woman with a knife very early on, because if they get inside that kill range, that close range, Now you're behind a power curve because now they have something that cuts on both edges, and is just as deadly. A knife's been around for thousands of years now in the world, not just the United States, and it shows that evil is real. If you paid attention to the world, I think they're called existentialist or trans-existentialist in the English type stuff. These are the people that say evil is real. This is the Nathaniel Hawthorne type people. And when you see this type of reaction to what's going on in the world, speaking about, I've spoke about it many times, the shooting I was involved with, that I had to report out on, had to get the message out. That individual was isolated himself. These lone wolf type people who start making up their own story in their head, then they think of how they're going to be the main player and get justice for said story. And a lot of times that results in violence. There's a lot of people that are passive that never would ever execute anything like this or prosecute anything like this. Then there's an increasing amount of instability in the world and with mental fortitude that you're seeing more and more people snap. It wasn't too long before that there was a mass stabbing in China. It's happened in Japan. Anywhere where there's gun laws doesn't stop violence. It just stops people from defending themselves. In the UK, they've had laws that prohibit the carry of knives because of this same type of thing. Violence is inherent to the human condition. And what we do to curtail it depends on what side of the world you live in. And when I say that, I mean, in the United States, if someone went nuts in a shopping mall, and it's happened here, with a knife, what's to stop someone from just defending themselves? Nothing. At the same time, we're being prosecuted more and more for defending ourselves. Look at Daniel Penny. He tried to help some people on a subway, and New York promptly punished him for defending his other riders, his other people. I'm willing to go down in that fight because I'm not willing to let innocents die or innocents get hurt. And I know I'm not in the minority. That's the cool thing about the 2A is you meet a lot of cool people. This weekend I'll be in the Cortez gun show representing Go Rogue again, Saturday and Sunday. And I know I'm going to run into the same type of people I always do at gun shows. It's really kind of sad. You're seeing more of an age gap. You're not seeing very many young people anymore coming to gun shows. That's a sad thing because that's how a lot of people, including myself, got roped into this kind of gig, is seeing and being around people. And I think that is part of what keeps us grounded, is being around people and understanding that, there is humanity behind what you're doing. Seeing someone as a target or seeing something that you can use and abuse, this is part of the issue with society. And it's not getting any friendlier or any nicer. In fact, it seems like the culture itself is encouraging you to stay in the pod, stay in your home, and just do your thing. I look at it in my small town, and you're seeing people more and more stay home, stay away from people, because they can slip into their digital world and just roll on and do, slay the dragons and win the princess, protect the princess. Reality is not so black and white. You have to get around people. You have to see what you're trying to defend. You have to be integrated in. We're not meant to live alone. It's taken me 46 years to learn that. As a society, as a culture, we have to be able to commune, to get around one another. We're not always going to agree, but those hurts, those pains that people have inflicted on you have to go away. And you have to have a mental fortitude, and I keep using that term, to know just because you can inflict some of the most extreme levels of violence doesn't mean you should. And I think that's indicative of the 2A community. Most of these shootings that end up happening are people from outside of our 2A community. Yeah, they may own a gun, but they're not someone that would go to a shooting range and talk to the buddies at the shooting range. Or they wouldn't go to a gun show. Or they wouldn't participate in a forum where they're talking about guns. Or where they're talking about law. And if they did, it would usually be in opposition of everything we think of. It speaks volumes to the left because it seems consistently you're getting leftist nuts that are going too off scale and thinking this is their way that they're going to influence the future. If you look at history in general, history is often a reflection of an individual's mandate. Prince Ferdinand, his murder instigated World War I. There's that type of thing. If one person at the right place can cause a history-changing event, that's possible. Look at the person that shot, or the people that shot JFK Jr. Look at the impact that had on our country. So it's not outside the realm that an individual can do something that influences history. But how much better would history be if someone stood up against them? Those are the romantic ideas I have about my country. And while I hope I never have to use a gun in anger in one of these situations, I always train for it. I caught myself this last weekend taking my 9mm out to the range and going through drills and realizing I needed to spend some more time doing it. Shooting is a perishable skill. It's something that if you're not on your A game, doesn't necessarily mean you're bad at it. Just means you need to get back to your A game. And that's where I see myself. My accuracy was good enough. I would actually say probably better than average. But it's not where it once was. And it's because I haven't had the time or the resources financially to buy the ammunition, which keeps getting more and more expensive, to go out and train. And I need to remedy that. Because as someone who talks about the 2A all the time, this is something that hits home. I didn't become a hardcore CCW guy until after the shooting. And that was because then I realized that people's lives are on the line, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let another kid or another person get killed by some deranged idiot. If it weren't for those people on Flight 93, I think it was, in 9/11, that actually fought and grounded the plane, there'd be a ton more death that happened that day. It only takes a few people to draw a line in the sand and say, no, enough's enough. And I think that's where we're at. And you're seeing the constant push, from the left to try to attack guns. So much so that you saw David Hogg this last week. He came out and he debated Lily Tang. Now, if you don't know who Lily Tang is, you need to check her out. She's ran for office in the United States. She's an immigrant, a legal immigrant, not illegal, but a legal immigrant, a real immigrant from China. And she basically told David Hogg that she's keeping her guns until she knows that there's not going to be a tyrannical government. And David Hogg had to concede that there is no guarantee that our government will not become tyrannical. that's a huge admission. And that's what we've always said in the 2A. You know, don't worry about my guns. My guns are not the problem. I worry about all those idiots that are still collecting a paycheck for the government who are allowing child trafficking from the border, knowing that these kids are being molested and used and abused. And they're willingly allowing this to happen. You know, those are the people I worry about. I worry about those officers that arrested David Penny for doing what was right by defending the people around him. You know, we've gotten to that point where we have to start asking ourselves a hard, honest question. Are those officers there to protect me, or are they there just to maintain a status quo? And are you okay with that? Because I sure the hell am not. And I damn sure am not going to allow someone to come into a church to stab my pastor without one hell of a fight. And I know I'm not the only one at my church. Like, share, subscribe, be great. Most importantly, stay strapped or get clapped.